Hello! Welcome to this week's video. For this week, I'm doing my wrap-up for the month of September. A few books, one DNF, which made me sad, but the three books this month, I believe. Yes. Two I enjoyed very much, and one I DNF'd. So let's get to the DNF first, shall we? Oh, this one disappointed me. I had tried this book years ago and had given up on it a lot earlier than I did this time. This time I made it a little over halfway. But the initial reason that I DNF'd it years ago was because I didn't like the classic sort of way of telling the story where it's an outside narrator kind of telling the story. Like, for example, in The Great Gatsby, the POV that you get is Nick What's-His-Face. And I don't give a shit about Nick What's-His-Face. I wanted to be in Gatsby and or Daisy's head, but we don't get that. So that's why, while I love the movie version of The Great Gatsby with Robert Redford, the Baz Luhrmann one just doesn't, I haven't seen it, but it doesn't really attract me to see it because I don't necessarily like Baz Luhrmann's directing style. He's very sort of over the top and just over the top and nonsensical, sort of, in my opinion. Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann worked for me just because it was Romeo and Juliet, and it was Leo and Claire Danes, and just the actors' performances sort of made me accept the sort of over-the-topness. But for the most part, he doesn't work for me. So I enjoyed the Great Gatsby movie version more than I enjoyed the book. And it was the same sort of thing here. With Wuthering Heights, the story is told through the nanny / housekeeper, Nellie? I think her name is Nellie. So this is touted as this grand, passionate love story. There's very little of that in here. And you don't get a love story. You get Heathcliff and Cathy, and the nanny remarking on sort of their relationship. You don't get scenes with them alone at all, Heathcliff and Cathy. Everything that happens is told where the nanny is present, because it's her point of view. But I was willing to go with it. The writing was fine, good. Not a problem there. That was not my issue. As I was reading, it slowly began to dawn on me how trash human both Cathy and Heathcliff are. These are trash people. They are awful people who apparently love each other and are obsessed with each other. The reader doesn't get to experience any of that. They just get the nanny's version of watching these two be obsessed with each other. And so, if you don't know, Heathcliff gets adopted by Cathy's father, just brings home this random boy one day, and he's raised in Kathy's family, but not really one of them. He's always, especially by Kathy's brother, sort of torn down and seen as this dirty, filthy dog that his father brought home. So, granted, he's treated like shit. Granted. However, he grows up, Heathcliff, and Kathy grows up, and as is wont to do when kids grow up sort of in the same environment, if they're not related, sometimes feelings tend to develop. And that's definitely what happened here. But then something happens, and Heathcliff leaves the city, the country. He leaves. And when he comes back, Kathy has married this other dude, Linton, and Linton has a sister. And I will say, in the movies, it's more clear that Heathcliff wants to have revenge on all of them. All of them. He thinks Kathy betrayed him by marrying this Linton dude, and he's just there to come back and cause havoc. In the book, I didn't really get that from Heathcliff. Like, I got he was angry, but I think he was just angry in general. He was angry when he left, he was angry when he came back. He didn't seem to think of it as like this big betrayal that Kathy married this Linton dude. He didn't like it, but he didn't seem to want to take revenge on her, as opposed to in the movie. He definitely wanted to take revenge on her. So he ends up marrying Lyndon's sister, Isabel. Isabel is a stupid girl who is sucked in to Heathcliff's orbit, even though everybody around her is telling her, stay away from Heathcliff, he's bad news, he's here for nefarious purposes, he doesn't really care about you. And she just doesn't listen. And in the book, Kathy doesn't seem really jealous about the fact that Heathcliff is pursuing Isabel. Again, she doesn't like it, but she's more about like trying to warn Isabel away from Heathcliff, because yes, Kathy loves him, but just her actions and her, again, this is all through the point of the nanny. Maybe if we were in Kathy's point of view, we would have seen more that she actually was jealous and was this like crazy, you can't have Heathcliff because he's mine sort of manner. We don't get that. We just get her kind of warning Isabel away from Heathcliff and like trying to kind of just like not being jealous about it, but just kind of coming from a sort of like advice place. So that was like very different from like the movies that I've seen. But Isabel and Heathcliff end up getting married. And of course, Heathcliff, being a trash human, treats her like shit. I don't believe he like beats her or anything, but he doesn't really want anything to do with her. He just sort of married her to get back at Linton for taking Kathy away from him. And there's like the whole thing with like the brother and like in the movie, Heathcliff comes back as this wealthy man and takes the brother's house away from him. and becomes the lord of the manor. In the book, that doesn't really happen. At least not to as far as I've gotten. The brother is like still living there, kind of like at the house. He's a drunk, and he's raising a demon child, son. And I believe Kathy and Linton have a girl, who they also named Kathy, for reasons. Because why not? Let's confuse people even more. And I'm going to spoil it. If you don't know the story by now, Kathy dies. Grown up Kathy dies. Not even halfway through the book. So I was like, what is going to keep my interest for the second half of this book? And not much did. Like, I think it was really stupid to kill her off not even halfway through the book. Not even. Because I made it just a little past halfway through the book, and Kathy had been dead for a while. So, there's that whole scene, like the death scene, and yes, that's very sad, and, was very, like, powerful and all that. But again, we're shown it through the eyes of the nanny. I don't care about the nanny. I wanted to be in Heathcliff's mind when Kathy was dying. I wanted to be in Kathy's mind when she was leaving Heathcliff because she was dying. Like, I don't understand the classic literature's propensity to have these sort of outside narrators. It sort of gives me the whole, like, show don't tell rule, and they're breaking it. They're telling everything. I don't understand then why supposed, like, reviewers and stuff now, whenever, like, books are released now, they complain, oh, we weren't immersed in the story. It was all a bunch of, like, telling instead of showing. Yeah, so was this. So was most classic literature. And y'all laud it like it's the best shit ever, and every book should be compared, should try to reach the status of classic literature. Do not get me wrong. I have classic literature that I love. Again, Jane Eyre, by Charlotte Bronte. Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. But again, in Jane Eyre, we are in Jane Eyre's point of view. In Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell, we are in Ruth's point of view. This, the freaking nanny slash housekeeper, I don't give a shit. But again, that's not why I DNF'd it. So, Kathy dies, the kids grow up, and Heathcliff pretty much leaves Isabel and leaves her to raise their son alone. Isabel tells their son, I think that his father died, or tells him, like, nothing about his father, which I know people have an issue about, like, oh, she had no right, he was her father, he was the father, and the son had a right to know about the father, and Heathcliff had a right to know about his son, and blah blah blah. No, Heathcliff was a piece of shit. And if that was me, I totally was on Isabel's side. I would have said, sweetie, your father died during the war. There must have been a war going on at this time. Your father died during the war. He was a good man. You will never meet him. That's what I would have told my son. If the father of my son was a piece of shit named Heathcliff. But Isabel dies. Isabel dies, and the little boy is, of course, given to his father, Heathcliff. And Heathcliff, like, the nanny is like Heathcliff, takes the boy and everything, and he's like, oh, you're gonna be, is basically like fawning over the boy and everything. And the nanny is like, oh, like, I'm glad that, like, you're showing affection to, like, your son. And she's, like, happy about the fact that he's, like, capable of love. Yeah, put a pin in that. First, he calls Isabel a slut. Isabel, who's now dead, a slut for not telling their boy about him. Because when the boy meets him, he knows nothing, and he is scared of this guy, and he's like, so that was my first, like, okay, I thought you couldn't be a bigger piece of shit, but here you are. You are calling the mother of your child a slut for keeping your child away from you when you were a piece of shit to her and didn't want to have anything to do with her. No. And then the moment that I DNF'd it, Heathcliff, turns out, wants to raise his son, not because he has any love for him, but because he wants his son to grow up rich and powerful and to be his instrument of revenge, to take the house away from what's-his-face, Kathy's brother, and to sort of just use the kid to as an instrument of revenge. And that's when I DNF'd it. Because I was like, you're mad at Isabel for not telling you about this child and not letting you, like, letting the child know, like, nothing about you. And instead of having this child now and loving this boy, he literally says, I have no affection for this child. I have no warmth in my heart for this child. I'm going to use this child as an instrument of my revenge. So, you. And I will say, once again, to those of you who say that the books are better than the movies, hell to the no. Hell to the no. The 1939 Laurence Olivier Merle Oberon version of Wuthering Heights, miles better than this book. The 2000-something version with Tom Hardy and Charlotte Riley, miles, I say, better than this book. And I don't care because I don't care if you come for me and be like, how can you say that? It's a classic piece of literature. The writing was good. The structure was awful. The characters were awful. The plot was shit. You killed the heroine off not even halfway through the book. In the movies, Kathy dies at the end, which is the rightful place. And then you get a little bit of an epilogue with the grown-up kids. And then Heathcliff does what he do. The structure of this is all wrong. All wrong. And in the movies, you get Kathy and Heathcliff's points of views. You experience their love story through them. Not through rando nanny housekeeper. She only shows up, I think, like around like the beginning and I think at the end, as she's starting to explain the story and when she finishes explaining the story, which is her rightful place. Like you see her like throughout like Kathy and Heathcliff's like growing up, and you know, Kathy confides in her sometimes and stuff, but the story itself, you're with Kathy, you're with Heathcliff. You see them falling in love. You see the passion between them. This, no. So right after when Heathcliff said that he was going to use his child as an instrument for his revenge, I'm out. So it was a disappointing DNF, but yeah. On to no, I'm not going to do this one yet. I'm going to do my audiobook, which was Resistance Women by Jennifer Chiaverini. Was a World War II set novel that I listened to on audiobook. And it was basically these 4 women from about the early 30s to the end of World War II. Towards the end of World War II. And they're in Germany. And sort of them living through the rise of Hitler's presidency, I guess. German president? I'm not sure what the term is. Prime Minister? But them living through Hitler's rise to power and through World War II. And this it was very much sort of Edward Rutherford-y, in the sense that, like, how it was historical fiction and it's using the characters to kind of describe the history of what was happening. And in the same way, the author did it in like a really good job, and like you're living it through the people and like their emotions and their fears as this stuff is starting to happen. And at first everybody's like, this Hitler dude's a joke, like nobody's gonna vote for him, and like it's like, oh my god, people are, you know, going to parades about him, and like what is happening right now, and like, oh, he lost the first election, woo, we dodged a bullet there. Oh, what is happening now? He's running again. Like, what? People are not gonna, they learned their lesson the first time, and like, oh, why are these crowds so big now? And like, what do you mean I lost my job because I'm a Jew? What do you mean I now have to wear an armband? What do you mean I have to leave my house? And it's just that sort of like slowly coming, like the horrors just teasing out little by little, and like it just getting worse and worse and worse. And just the parallels of the sort of the societal attitudes of what was happening as he rose to power, and people thinking of him as this big joke compared to what was happening in the US not that long ago, where certain people were rising to power and people were thinking, oh, this guy's a joke, and like all these like rights and freedoms that we took for granted. And now how like some people are losing those rights and freedoms. And it was very sort of, you can see how it happened then with an eerie parallel to what's happening in the world from that certain point in time in 2016 to now. And it was just so kind of well done, because you were witnessing history in resistance women. You were witnessing this history through the points of view of these women, and how they gradually came together to form this network to work against Hitler, and sort of what happened to them after. And I didn't realize when I was listening to it at the end that these were all real life women. That the four-ish women that we're introduced to, the 4 female characters we're introduced to in the book, were actual real life women. So that was a very interesting surprise. So yeah, I absolutely enjoyed that book. Yeah, very, very much. Moving on, we have 19 Steps by Millie Bobby Brown. I enjoyed this book. I will say, I especially enjoyed the ending of this book, because this book evolves into some melodramatic soap opera crazy sauce that I adored to the depths of my soul. I loved the ending to this book so much. So if you don't know, Millie Bobby Brown is a actress who plays Eleven on Stranger Things. She decided that she was going to write a book based on a family story that she had heard about her during World War II. An aunt, I think, of hers, grandmother, who lived through World War II and lived through the air raids in London, and how they would have to go into, whenever there were air raids, they would have to go into in Britain they're called the Tube, but here in Canada we would call them subway stations. So they would have to go down into the subway station to wait out when they would get the all clear that it was safe to come out again. And down into the subway station, particularly that the fictional character Nellie and her family would go into, there were these 19 steps. And they were very precarious steps. And Nellie works for the mayor. And the mayor and the sort of government, their little council there, are trying to get the government to fund repairs or like sort of to make it a safer kind of infrastructure. And of course, the government turns them down and tells them that they're not getting the money that they need. So what do you think happens? Of course, there is a tragedy that happens when there is an air raid thing that goes off, and people, somebody falls on the steps, and then it creates a domino effect where a lot of people die. So this is all told through the character of Nellie Morris, and she's around like 18, 19. And she's, she works for the mayor, and, she has a family. She has a little sister named Flo, who I adored. I adored that little girl so much. And she has a big older brother named George, and she's there with her friends. She has this boy Billy, who she's grown up with, who totally has a crush on her. Then one day she meets this American soldier named Ray, and they fall in love, and it's very beautiful and lovely. But then the tragedy happens, and I thought I didn't like how Nellie sort of lost her shit on everybody. She started blaming everybody for what happened, including her mother. Her mother, who just lost her husband and her daughter. So, again, this is spoilery, okay? This is spoilery. And I really didn't like that part of the book. Because I understand Nellie was grieving. But so was her mother. So was, like, everyone kind of, like, around her. She should have been, like, more, like, supportive kind of her mother at that time. Now, granted, and she even, like, she blames Ray because she mistakenly believes that his car backfiring caused the panic that made everybody run into the subway. And then she learns that that's not what happened, and so she put a pin in that. I don't think that there was a scene where she ever apologized to her mom for the things that she said to her. They just sort of went on with kind of life. I would have liked a scene where Nellie apologizes to her mom, but they just sort of forget about it, and everybody's like, oh, like, we were all blaming each other, and, you know, it was a hard time, and blah, blah. But I didn't think that was good enough. So Nellie's blaming Ray for this happening, and tells him that she never wants to see him again, and Ray gets called back to duty, because I think I mentioned that he was an American soldier. He gets called back to duty, and so they part on not the best of terms. But gradually, when Nellie does learn the truth about, like, what actually caused the tragedy, she writes a letter to Ray apologizing and asking him to forgive her, which I liked that. I liked that very much. But unfortunately, Nellie gets the news that Ray was his plane went down, and he's presumed killed in action. And my spidey senses already were going off. I was thinking, well, I know what I would do if I was writing this book. And Millie, Bobby Brown, you and me, same page. Now, yes, I know that this was actually written by a Kathleen McCurl. But it's Millie Bobby Brown's story. Kathleen McCurl just helped her execute it. So Nellie believes that Ray is dead, and Billy is there to comfort her. So Nellie decides that she's going to give Billy a chance. And feelings develop, and she realizes, I can be happy again. And she agrees to marry Billy. And this is about 2 days before the wedding. Come and knock on our door. Guess who shows up again? Guess who's actually not dead? Ray shows up 2 days before the wedding. But, and God bless her, God bless Nellie, she's like, I made a commitment, though. I do love Billy, and I know that I can be happy with him. You were my first love, the love of my life, but I'm gonna have to let you go. So Ray's like, I don't want to like interfere in your life. I will respect your decision. I will love you until the day I die. And then Nellie's like, yeah, same. But I again, it was definitely like that sort of time period where you were more the idea of commitment, the idea of like giving your word to somebody, of giving your heart to somebody, of making a promise, the idea of breaking that was more scandalous and harder to accept than it is now. Like today, if your love came back and you realized you were still in love with them, you know, you're more likely to break off your engagement to pursue your own happiness. Back then, it was more of a there was less of a chance that you would feel that that was okay. But so the actual day of the wedding, Ray shows up, but he doesn't actually like he just sort of like shows up kind of like in the background there, because he just wants to see Nellie get married. But she sees him, and and then Billy sees him, and this has like evolved into this melodramatic, crazy soap opera bonkers banana sandwich. And I loved it. I loved it so much because now Billy knows that he's alive. And Billy knows that Nellie always loved Ray. So choices have to be made. And I won't spoil the ending for you, but I was just so happy that it sort of played out exactly how I would have written it. And that just made me happy. So it took me a while to sort of get immersed in. Let's see if I can get that in the frame. There we go. It took me a while to get sort of into the book, and that was because of the writing style. But on reflection, my complaint about the writing style was that it felt very immature to me. But I've thought about that. And I thought about the fact that Nellie is supposed to be 18, 19. But then I would say, well, I've read books where the main character is 8 and 19, and the writing is more polished, I guess, more mature, more just better in my opinion. But then I thought, if this is supposed to be a YA book, then the writing style works. But I don't know. I don't think I specifically see anything on it that specifies that it's a YA novel. But I will say this. Leaving the if it's a YA novel argument on, just put a pin in that for a second. My thought was, the writing style, I wouldn't have had an issue with it if Millie Bobby Brown herself wrote out the book. Like, I know it's her story. She did the concept for it. I'm not sure how involved in the writing the actual writing of it, she was. But I believe that it was a collaborative effort. I would have given more leniency to the writing style if Millie Bobby Brown had wrote it specifically herself, knowing that she is not an author. This is her first book. Yeah. But the fact that a ghostwriter wrote it, well, not a ghost, Kathleen McClure, she is actually named as the writer, and I really like that. I like that Millie Bobby Brown gives her credit, has publicly given her credit for helping her with this book and writing this book. But just the fact that there was an author behind this book kind of made me less inclined to be kind of lenient about the writing style. I would have been more lenient if it had been Millie Bobby Brown actually writing the book, because the writing style just read very sort of immature to me. Even though, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this book. I absolutely enjoyed this book. Again, particularly the last third. The last third of this book just sang to my soap opera melodramatic loving heart. So I will be giving this 4 stars. It just doesn't get a 5 because I'm conflicted about the writing style. And again, if it's a YA book, I get it. I get the writing style. But if it's just a regular fiction, adult general fiction, then the writing style just didn't work for me. But again, love the plot, especially the plot arc of the last third of the book. Absolutely loved it. So, yep, that's my wrap up for the month of September. I do not have a Audible audiobook yet, but I will be starting J.R. Ward's The Beast. I was going to start J.R. Ward's The Beast, but it happened to coincide with when this came out. So I had to put this on hold because I was like, I am definitely reading this and grabbing it ASAP. So now I will be getting back into the Black Dagger Brotherhood world with The Beast, which is Rage and Mary's second book. So very much looking forward to that. In terms of classics, after the letdown that was Wuthering Heights, I am now reading the complete journals of L.M. Montgomery, the PEI years 1901 to 1911. And I am thoroughly enjoying it. I am about a third in, not halfway there yet, but yep. And it's, I just love her writing voice so much. And it's giving me those same sort of Anne of Green Gables good sort of feelings. There's some hard bits in here when she's clearly going through depression. And as someone who has suffered from depression in her 20s, I've been through that. 20s were a hard decade, y'all. Those bits are hard for me to read. But the other parts are just so good, and just her writing style is so reminiscent of Anne of Green Gables and that whole writing style. And I realized that that's not a plot thing that she specifically used for Anne of Green Gables, that's her actual, like, voice. That's her actual writing voice, like, where she's writing, like, in these diaries. It's like you're in the Anne of Green Gables world. Just the pure, like, the way she talks about nature and just her thoughts and her feelings and just her humor. I mean, I'm thoroughly enjoying this right now. So it's giving me a nice sort of palate cleanser after the hot mess that was Wuthering Heights. So very much looking forward to finishing that. So I think that's going to be it for this week's video. If you've read 19 Steps by Millie Bobby Brown, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you disagree with me about Wuthering Heights, that's fine. You can keep that in a secret little box to yourself. You can just tell me that you disagree, that's fine. But don't sort of bash me for having my thoughts about it and tell me that my thoughts are wrong or what have you, or just don't come for me in the comments about Wuthering Heights. If you loved it, great, keep that. I'm glad for you. I don't understand it, but I'm glad for you. If you think that I'm wrong and have all these thoughts and stuff, keep that in a secret, beloved little box in your heart. Keep that for you. I don't need to know about it. But yeah, tell me what you're reading sort of right now. And I think that's going to be it for this week's video. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/authorejamie. Like my Facebook page at facebook.com/authorejamie. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!